Conversations across time, 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 across time, conversations 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 across time.
Welcome to Conversations Across Time, the program that allows you to witness imaginary, honest, no-holds-barred conversations between historical personalities. These persons, or immortals if you will, have greatly shaped the conversations and issues of today. You and I, together, will get a glimpse into these fascinating personalities. Welcome. And we have with us today former Pennsylvania State Representative Babette Josephs. Welcome, Babette.
Thank you so much.
Seated next to my dear friend Babette is Countess Berthold. Countess Berthold is a German aristocrat who lived during the period of the end of the First World War through the end of the Second World War in Germany. Welcome, Countess.
Oh, well, thank you, and welcome to you.
Thank you. And seated next to her is the 28th President of the United States, President Woodrow Wilson. Welcome, President Wilson.
Thank you.
Seated next to President Wilson is abolitionist, citizen of the United States, and certainly one of the foremost thinkers of the 19th century, Mr. Frederick Douglass. Welcome, Mr. Douglass.
Thank you.
Now, we actually had a conversation a few weeks ago in which the parties were here, and one of the things that we tried to discuss and tried to understand was what was going on in the minds of the German people and how Germany came to be in the position that it was vis-a-vis the Treaty of Versailles and what that treaty meant to the German people. So when we left, we were asking Countess Berthold if she could give us some explanation as to how she, as a German aristocrat, could witness the rise of the madman, Adolf Hitler, and what the German aristocrats were thinking at that time. So I want to just ask again, because I had some questions, as you know me. My questions had to do with how in the world the German aristocracy could allow someone like an Adolf Hitler, a paper hanger from Austria, so he wasn't really a German, to rise to power. And so, Countess, if you'd like, if you had the opportunity, please just tie up for us how it is that the Germans could allow someone like an Adolf Hitler to rise to power. Now, you said that he charmed the German women. He charmed the German women of the aristocracy. And how did he do that?
Well, the German women, they loved him. Again, we found him to be extremely attractive. And his main focus was, he told us that he was celibate and he was mainly focused on the country. And we liked that. We liked that. We thought it was very, very important.
And you thought it was true.
We believed him. And we gave him gifts of money, and we gave him gifts of our jewelry. And to naturally, to further his political cause. That this, of course, was for the greater good of Germany. I understand that.
Yeah, what was a few gypsies and, sexual perverts and Jews, what did they count, right? I mean, he never made any attempt to conceal what he was about. Never. All the anti-Semitism, all the anti-homophobia, all the everything was always on the surface.
But Babette, may I ask you this question? Because you say he never attempted to conceal. When we last met, Mr. Douglass brought up a very interesting point. He talked about how there were so many people of the Western world, so many leaders of the Western world who did not view Hitler as the tyrant that he came to be. And there were industrialists, there were American industrialists that supported him. So I guess what I'm sort of surprised at is we want to ask what happened to the Germans and how could they let someone like an Adolf Hitler fester. But what about the rest of the world?
The rest of the world was complacent also. Hitler violated the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Nobody tried to enforce them on him. He stopped paying reparations. He started to build the military again.
But when you said that he articulated what he was going to do, his anti-Semitism, his geopolitical goals, we in the West, and many Western leaders, including my predecessors, they believe that's political rhetoric. We do that a lot of times in our country. We make promises, we throw things out, we make racial statements to get elected, but we know that we can control those politicians, and they don't really mean what they're saying. It's an appeal to the lower classes sometimes.
I refer you to the U.S. House of Representatives as it now exists, huh? I mean, those Tea Party people said, we are not going to spend another cent, and they meant it.
That's true, but there's also people that made promises in Congress, in our current Congress, that never, and we knew they were false promises. They were to get elected. So
we're back to the same question. People thought they could control them.
But President Wilson,
people thought they can control.
But President Wilson, one of the things that troubles me, one of the things that really troubles me is that you, in fact, appealed to the minorities. You appealed to the African American community to vote for you, saying that when I get into power, I am going to do all these great things to equalize race relations. Now, you made a statement that in, I believe it was 1914 and 1915, I'm not sure, and Mr. Douglas will correct me because this is his bailiwick, that, well, if the American Negro made a mistake in voting for me, they should correct it. So I'm thinking that when I view the Countess and what the aristocracy in Germany thought about Hitler, I'm wondering if, in fact, the American Negro, at the time, that's what we would call the Negro, if we had made a mistake with you. But I'm going to ask, I'm going to defer to Mr.
So you're
Douglas.
accusing me of using political rhetoric?
I'm accusing you of being a liar.
Well, that's political rhetoric. I'm just saying it in a nicer way. But I had every intention of carrying out what I said, but I couldn't do it because I was stymied by democratic forces from the South who would not allow me to do it. And you have to remember, my party, most of my support of my party, the Democrats came from the South and they were segregationists.
And wait a minute, you say they were segregationists. I point to the fact that you, President Wilson, actually had a filming in the White House of Birth of a Nation, and which Birth of a Nation describes the Ku Klux Klan and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan as being a natural result of the Reconstructionists. Now, so you say they, I think we're talking about you.
Well, we looked at the film as an artistic thing, not as a political thing.
Well, artistic or not.
Easy enough to do.
Yeah.
If you're not the victim. And I'm very interested in what you just said. I mean, since you indulged in political rhetoric, which is to say you lied, you just figured Hitler lied too. I think that's called psychological projection. You have to be careful when you do that.
I'm a political scientist, not a psychologist, so I don't know what you call it, Babette.
Well, that's an interesting answer. Let's look at that. In today's psychopathy, there's a concept, actually some people call it a disease, called cognitive dissonance. That is to say, you may have serious beliefs about something, but your actions are completely opposite. So you were a great espouser of international morality, of internationalism, of bringing nations together. But in this nation, in your own nation, you subjugated African American people. Now, when I
Called us monkeys. Called us monkeys, Mr. Douglas.
Yes, they called us monkeys, but when I look at Mr. Wilson, I find him in the context of so many of our American presidents, including your namesake, the other Thomas that was elected president, Thomas Jefferson, had the same kind of inconsistencies, great flowery words, but in their personal life and their personal actions, there was this complete reversal. Now, I looked at your background. You were born in Virginia. You were raised in Georgia. You were raised also in Columbia, South Carolina. And you were raised in the South during a period of Reconstruction. You were born 4 years before Abraham Lincoln was elected, and you yourself say you had two great remembrances as a child. One, you were about 3 years old, and you said you remembered people saying, Abraham Lincoln is now elected, there's going to be a war. You were 3 years old. And later you said you'll never forget the face of the great general that you met when you were a child, Robert E. Lee. So you grew up in this neo-Confederacy that slavery was good. You said that. And then you get to run for president of the United States. And in 1912, when you ran for president of the United States, you appealed to African Americans, and you said that you would be fair dealing in your race relations. When you and great numbers of African Americans left the Republican Party, and voted for you as a Democrat. And then when you got in office, you were absolute bigoted, racist, and you said so yourself with comfort, not only with the Birth of a Nation film, and that was broadcast all over the nation and internationally, that the President of the United States watched the film in the White House elevating the Ku Klux Klan, and in that film it portrays African Americans as being predators of white women, and the Ku Klux Klan coming in their knight in shining armor to save the reputation of the white woman. That was broadcast all over the world.
Mr. Douglas, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. As we always do. I know you're getting warmed up. We're going to give President Wilson an opportunity to collect his thoughts. We will be right back, and we will, at that time, address the issues that you so cogently brought forth.
Conversations across time. Conversations across time.
So here I am, waiting for a bus on a street corner, when my friend Vivienne drives by in a car and says, Babette, I want you. I need you. So I thought, sure. And I had a card with me, my business card. I gave it to her, and I thought, I probably won't hear from Vivienne again for a while. But right away, she emailed me, she called me, and now I'm doing her concept, which is really, really interesting, to make history alive and to relate it to what's happening now in our country and our world.
I'm Jennifer Burton, producer of Conversations Across Time. Watch us on PhillyCam.
I hope you join us for Conversations Across Time. It's an idea that has been germinating for a long time, and I believe there's something for everyone. It's education and entertainment.
Across time, conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time, conversations across time,
Conversations across time. Before we took a break, Mr. Douglas had confronted President Wilson about some of the hypocrisies of his political stances and the fact that he, as a person who fostered racism in his own country, was certainly not in a position to make a statement about anti-Semitism in Germany. So, Mr. Douglas, I want you to finish with your charge, and we've given the President an opportunity, President Wilson has had an opportunity to think about this. Let's go back, let's talk about that. Now, you raised certain important issues that need to be addressed. In 1912, the election of the president, in which he promised certain things to African Americans of the United States.
Yes. In 1912, Woodrow Wilson in his campaign said he would have fair dealing in his domestic race relations. Fair dealing was his term. And when he was elected in 1912, one of the first things he did was to purge African Americans from two critical departments. The post office, number one, systematically went through the post office, eliminating appointed positions. Systematically also went through the Treasury Department, eliminating appointed positions from his predecessor, which was Taft. And incidentally, President Taft had been very close to Booker T. Washington, which opened the doors for a lot of those presidential appointments. So Wilson came with a sieve and just knocked out all of those political appointees. Not only that, he set up segregation inside of federal government, segregated toilets, segregated lunchrooms. Screens were put down the middle, so you had black employees on one side, white employees on the other side.
These things did not exist before the President Wilson?
No, exactly. It did. The purge did not exist because Taft was just the opposite. And also the screening, the advent of segregated facilities in the post office and the Treasury Department. Also, he instituted something that had not been around since maybe 1863. That is a photograph with your application for federal employment. That automatically discriminated and I was going to say disenfranchised African Americans, but also disenfranchised other groups because of that photograph.
Now, here's what's interesting about that point.
Let me just interject in here, Mr. Douglas. First of all, Washington, D.C. was a segregated city long before I became president. Jim Crow law was practiced in Washington.
But the post office is all over the country.
But we lived in Washington, and we had to conform to the Jim Crow laws of Washington, D.C. Now,
why?
Because they were the laws of. I didn't pass the laws in Washington. Congress passes.
You're federal.
No, Congress passes the laws for Washington, D.C. Congress passes the law. I don't pass laws. I just enforce the laws. That's the job of the president. I did make those promises to the Negroes in the election campaign in 1912, and I intended to keep them. I was stymied by the Southern Democrats in my party.
But you were a Southern Democrat. This is what was so amazing to me.
I was governor of New Jersey. I left the South long before that.
But the South didn't leave you.
University. Yes, I did. I left my beliefs. When I became a chancellor of Princeton, I was governor of New Jersey. I was stymied by the Southern Democrats.
Didn't you segregate offices? I said it before, that were all over the country. The post office in New York was now segregated, right? The Treasury Department in...
We had to have some consistency, Babette.
Well, wait a minute. So if you're going to discriminate against people, discriminate against them all. That's a great consistency.
In 1916, when Mr. Wilson, you were up for re-election, you said if the blacks doesn't like what I'm doing, they could find somebody else.
I won that election, so I guess they
voted for me. By a narrow margin, you did. But I'm just saying that indicates your consistent attitude. In other words, you lied in 1912. You demonstrated absolute bigotry and racism throughout your first administration. And then you said, well, if blacks don't like it, they know what they can do about it. So, I mean, and not only that, you said many, many other things. You called African Americans monkeys. You even had a drawing of a picture of an African American in the shape of a monkey. So I mean, throughout I just think that you are inflicted with that presidential disease called hypocrisy.
Now, may I say something? I want to just throw this in. So it seems to me, as someone who was a principal architect of the Treaty of Versailles, and I find myself in an unusual position because I, as an African-American person who also happens to be Jewish, I am looking at this and saying, look at what you set in place. Of course, if you treated the African-Americans of your country, the United States, in the way that, with the disdain that you did, you had to know what was going to happen to the minorities in Germany as a result of your Treaty of Versailles.
But
so when the Countess... Yeah, when the Countess sits here and says, oh, well, wait a minute, we looked at Hitler and he was doing all of these positive things and we sort of like overlooked the other things. I don't even know if Germany would have been as anti-Semitic as it was had it not been that you set into place this railroad, this train that led its way down the path of bigotry that allowed German aristocracy and the Germans in general to look at Jews, to look at gypsies, to look at homosexuals. I mean, can't you see that you set that, and black people, you set all of that in place. There.
I don't think Hitler ever quoted my statements in my campaigns and using how I promised.
You didn't have to quote them to be influenced by you, and by understanding that the kind of hypocrisy that you were practicing, he could practice. And the idea, again, I have to go back to it, that you thought we could have peace without justice, that we could have peace without freedom. What were you thinking? What were you thinking?
No, I think this, I don't even know that you were thinking. That's my problem.
Let me pose one question to the entire panel. Yes. Given everything, and we took a vote, and we voted to have equality for all Jews in Germany, equality for all Negroes in the United States, but we would still face the threat of a communist Bolshevik, a godless Bolshevik takeover, or we could stop communism and work slowly towards true equality. What do you think the majority of the people in the United States, in England, in France, and the rest of the world would vote for?
We know because they did it, because they let Hitler go ahead, because they were more frightened of the alternative.
Let me just suggest
and
this.
Because people don't act until they're affected.
So we all agree that people were willing to sacrifice certain minority groups to stem.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
As long as you have not been a member of the minority group.
Roosevelt among them.
Exactly. And let us not, I'm sorry, Mr. Douglas, because I want to get to you because I think this is very important. We need to understand how everyone was thoroughly complacent with what was happening in Germany to the minorities.
And happening in this country.
And happening in this country. Absolutely, I agree with you. And I'm looking at this and saying, so is it as long as it's not us,
right?
It's okay.
Right. So what do we do, I guess, is the question, to clear our thinking as a world and not allow this kind of compromise to happen, to always work towards understanding that people need to be free, need to have justice, or you never have peace.
But here's the question, it's interesting, and I want to pose this to Mr. Douglas. The end of the Second World War, Japan surrendered as a result of bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And one of the things that was so interesting to me when I view how the Germans who were on trial for war crimes viewed this, and they said, do you think that the United States would have dared to drop a bomb, a weapon of that destruction on a people who were European?
Absolutely not.
These were yellow people.
That's why
the Japanese.
That's why
it was accepted.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I've looked at that and I've tried to study that principle, and I think two things. Number one, it was the Japanese that bombed Pearl Harbor. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor.
Roosevelt precipitated them into doing that. Come on.
We can talk about the cause, but let's talk about the effect.
Yeah.
The effect is that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and it was a great sense of needing to retaliate. And secondly, if Germany would not have surrendered, there's no question in my mind that we would have dropped an atomic bomb on Germany.
You're comparing apples and oranges, because if you drop an atomic bomb on Germany, the effective atomic bomb on countries that were our allies, France, would have been devastating, whereas Japan's an isolated island. So you're comparing apples and oranges in that. However, there's racism today. The Supreme Court
Heaven's
In this
sake.
year, roll back the Voting Rights Act, you have an African-American president today who can't stop that. He tries to get his attorney general to stop it, and the Supreme Court stymied his attorney general. So even with all of that, we still have those kind of
Not to mention
discriminatory
how
and
much he
racism
spies
today.
on us all.
Let me suggest where I think Hitler and Germany was. Germany was down, they needed to be lifted up. But let's remember this, power concedes nothing without a demand. Hitler made the demand and he organized to get the power. And then he was able to see how much endurance the German people would take with his imposition of his will. And he found out the German people would take a lot. And so tyrants are only limited by the endurance of the people that they are oppressing. And that goes not only for Hitler, but Mussolini, Mao Zedong, Saddam Hussein.
Let's talk about Assad.
You know, if Hitler had died in 1938, before the invasion of Poland,
Yes.
he would have been revered in history as a great man. He would have been revered as the savior of the world from communism and the savior of Germany.
And
He went too far, but he would have, if he had died in 1938, he would have been revered as a great man.
No question about it.
And I want to say this. You say that if he had died in 1938, he would have been revered as a great man?
Yes.
And I sit here as an African-American woman who also is Jewish and say to you, and how many Jews would still be alive if he had died in 1938?
6 million.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that.
That's true, but don't forget, and I
But
mentioned
that, he
it.
went to the extremes, and we're saying up until that point, everybody agreed he did wonders for Germany, and he was a great
I
man,
don't know,
and he
my
saved the
parents
world
didn't
from
think so.
communism.
My parents didn't think so. My parents were, I've talked about it all the time through my childhood, how anguished they were, what was going on starting in the early 30s. The rhetoric, the gradual closing in on Jews, the putting back of women into the kitchen again.
And the gypsies, let's not talk about the gypsies and the homosexuals. Anybody who was not what he approved of.
Yeah, there were
And
political sterilizations. I mean, we know all of these things. If the question is why, if
The question is why.
If the question is why, I think we've articulated today a number of factors that indicate the why.
But it's an eternal mystery.
And you know something?
It's a mystery.
What's interesting to me, I want to thank my guests because we sit here and we've raised more questions than we've answered.
That's the way it
But I
should
certainly
be.
believe that this is something that we need to have you come back because I don't know that we end up with an answer to this. But what I want to say is that it's important that we have these conversations across time. It is important that we just make these discussions and have people understand what was going on. So I thank you, Babette, as always.
My pleasure.
I thank you, Countess Berthold, for coming here and representing the German aristocracy. And I thank you, President Wilson,
Thank
for
you for
sitting
having
here
me.
and allowing us to attack you the way that we did.
Thank you for having me.
And I thank you, Mr. Douglas, as always. Thank you for being here. And let us again know that the important thing that we do here with these conversations across time is to enlighten people, to educate people, to entertain people, and also to ask ourselves more questions. I hope you leave this conversation across time with some questions, and hopefully I can assemble this austere panel again, and we will examine again what happened that led to the creation of a madman called Adolf Hitler. Thank you so much.
Conversations across time, 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 across time, conversations across time, conversations conversations across time.